I always considered myself a practical person, but after that accident, I began to doubt my perception of reality. It all started that day when I was driving along a winding road leading to my favorite fishing spot. The rain poured down like from a bucket, and I, perhaps a little too caught up in the moment, accelerated. Suddenly, a turn appeared before me that I didn't notice in time. I swerved, but the car skidded, and I lost control. I woke up in the woods, filled with silence, except for the sounds of dripping water and rustling leaves. My car was in ruins, and I was unhurt, just a couple of scrapes on my hands and a hard hit to my head. I tried to call for help, but my phone had no signal. Thinking help wouldn't come soon, I decided to find a road, or at least someone who could help. As I walked through the forest, I noticed the darkness thickening. I had been walking for about an hour when I saw something strange in the distance, a silhouette of a house standing among the trees. It looked abandoned, with peeling walls and broken windows. But at that moment, it was my only reliable direction. I headed towards it, hoping to find shelter and maybe help. As I got closer, the house gave me a chilling impression. Its doors were slightly ajar, as if someone was waiting for me. I knocked, but received no answer. All my instincts told me to turn back, but I felt I couldn't allow myself to retreat into the emptiness of the woods. I stepped inside. The silence was oppressive. It was dark inside, and the air carried a musty smell, as if no one had lived there for years. I turned on my phone's flashlight and illuminated the room. Old furniture covered in dust and several paintings on the walls, the images indistinct in the dim light. Suddenly, I heard a sound, a faint, barely audible whisper. I froze. My heart raced. I thought it was just the wind, but the whisper repeated, as if someone was calling me. I didn't know what to do. Fear filled me, but curiosity pushed me forward. I moved deeper into the house, step by step, sinking further into darkness. I noticed a door at the end of a long hallway, slightly open. I approached it, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow flit behind it. The words in the air became clearer. It was a cry, but not an ordinary one. It was filled with suffering and despair. I opened the door. Inside was a room with broken windows, where moonlight filtered through the dusty glass. In the center stood an old wooden bed, and papers covered the floor, filled with strange notes. I bent down to examine them and saw they were records of some experiments related to human consciousness. My fear peaked, and I turned to run. But something stopped me. I felt a presence behind me. I turned around, but there was no one there. Only the cold wind, which seemed to whisper in my ear. I rushed back to the stairs, but just as I started up, there was a crack. I looked back and saw the door I had just come through slowly closing. I stood frozen, unable to believe my eyes. It clicked shut. I returned to the hallway, where silence now reigned, as if the house was waiting for something. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. An inexplicable horror gripped me as I realized I was not just in an abandoned house, but in a trap set by someone who had once lived there. Suddenly, I heard the whisper again. It grew louder and closer. I pressed my ears to the wall to hear better and realized it wasn't just a sound. It was words. "Help me." In that instant, I felt the darkness behind me shifting. I turned around and saw a shadow standing against the wall, its outlines unclear, but I knew it was watching me. My blood ran cold. I didn't know how to react, run or stay. The word "help" echoed again, but now it was clearer and more insistent. I felt fear leaving me, replaced by resolve. I had to help, even if it meant confronting what I could not understand. I gathered my courage and shouted, "Who are you? What happened?" The shadow came a bit closer, and I discerned the outline of a woman. She looked lost, her face filled with horror and anguish. "Help me," she whispered again, and in her voice was such pain that I couldn't refuse. I had to free her, even if I didn't know how. I tore the chains binding her to the floor, and she stood up, Regaining strength, I turned to the shadow and saw it beginning to dissipate. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. I felt the darkness around me start to dissipate. The moment we rushed out, the house began to crumble as if it couldn't withstand our escape. We burst into the open air and fresh wind filled our lungs. I turned to look back at the house, but it was already starting to vanish, as if it had never existed. The woman next to me straightened her shoulders and looked at me with gratitude. "Now I am free," she said, and there was hope in her voice. I couldn't believe it had all been real. I glanced back to ensure the house was truly gone, and although I survived, a shadow of that horror remained in my heart. I didn't know what was true and what wasn't, but one thing I knew for sure: I would never be the same again.